one day to make all three chopped meat. That's father, daughter, and the man I hate. Oh, my dears, so many roads lead fast to death. How can one choose?
This is Theatre Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. You must not miss the most exciting experience on Broadway right now, and it's Medea. We have its director and star with us right now, and here to introduce them, Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
I second what Susan says. Medea is a harrowing, thrilling, and oddly enough, in some ways, tender production, which I think we will get into. It is brilliantly, brilliantly staged by Deborah Warner, joining us from London, or where your home base is now, correct?
Yeah, always been. Yeah.
And Medea is brilliantly, terrifyingly performed by the great actress Fiona Shaw. Welcome both to Theatre Talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I don't want to give away the ending of this 2,500-year-old play, but people watching this show probably know that Medea murders her children. And I'm curious to know, can you, as the director and as the actress, justify that action?
I'm not sure it's our job to justify it, but I think the astonishing thing is that our playwright has written the most explosive text where he takes us on a journey whereby we, the audience, understand why she does it. And at the moment of her preparation and her doing it, we so understand that we don't stand up and protest.
And we don't hate her. I mean, that's
and
to
we
me
don't hate her.
Is the extraordinary thing about this play and your performance. You kill your children, and yet we weep for the children as much as you weep for her.
Yeah, I suppose it's about a monstrous act, isn't it, by a very unmonstrous person. And I suspect most monstrous acts are done by very unmonstrous people. And I think that's the crude, sharp morality of the play, that it makes you look at the fact that we make monsters out of people, but actually people are just people.
Well, right now we're dealing with this situation of the woman who took the children in for a welfare check and kept them in a basement and starved one to death, and the others were brutalized. And we look at that woman as a monster, but do you look at her and say, well, not a monstrous person, that's...
Well, a story in the theatre, of course, is a story of imagination, and the problem about people in life is it may be a story of psychology or psychosis. I don't think Medea is about psychosis. It may be that the people that we read or hear about in the news are actually in medical or psychological difficulty. Medea isn't. She's just in emotional difficulty. That's the really horrible truth of it, that she's not mad. She does something so beyond rational suitability that you might think she might be mad, but that's a sort of cop-out. The worrying fact is that she's not mad, that just with insanity she does this terrible thing. And I think King Lear is the same, you know, Hamlet's the same. These people aren't mad, they're just in extremis.
And the press never allows us to know any detail, you know. So I think the loved ones of those that have murdered have a much greater grasp of why the deed was done, because they're close. And
you can't see this production without thinking of this sensational case we had in this country a few years ago about the woman who drowned her children, Susan Smith. Was this in your mind at all when you approached this play?
Well, there was a documentary on British television about it, and we got a copy of that, and we did actually look at that as part of a vast case of videos we were looking at. We looked at David Beckham too.
Yes.
For studies of Jason.
There was a series of them. There had been, when we were in Ireland, there had been a case of a woman who had driven her car right up to a cliff to see that the tide was out with her children in it, and therefore backed the car out again and went to another place. I mean, people become incredibly precise at these moments of suicide or murder of their children, because the thing is gruesomely pragmatic often. And so there was endless incidents in the paper of things that we looked at, and Susan Smith was just one of them. Yeah.
So as you conceived it and as you play it, if Medea isn't mad, why does she do it?
I think we spend an hour and a half seeing why she in the end has to do it. I don't think she tries not to do it. I mean, it's about somebody trying not to kill their children.
She's trying to talk herself out of not doing the act that she must do.
And because she loves them, because it's all about love. I mean, the thing is a fantastic exploration, or sort of card hand about when you say I love you, what are you saying? You're saying, if you leave me, I will kill our children, or are you saying I love you and I won't mind if you leave me? You know, it's about really the nature of adult passion, much more than it's about children.
then are the children becoming pawns in this battle between the sexes that this play is also about?
Well, I think a lot of children are pawns in a lot of adult relationships, and I think the myth of modern sentimental culture is that children are the basis of our society. Not at all. Human adult passion is the basis of our society, and it's a much more dangerous, explosive basis.
And human adult passion, unbridled as it is in this play, will wreak havoc on the world.
Well, I mean, the discovery really that we made is that Medea is a love story. It's not a revenge play. You know, it's a love story, and that's, I mean, in a sense, a remarkable discovery. But what makes it a very, very unique situation is Jason and Medea are utterly obsessed with each other. Two very famous people, a very, very passionate, great and ruinous love affair. And within that, of course, what makes her unique is that her history includes having killed somebody for that love affair.
Right.
She killed her brother for her love of Jason. And if anything, it's a very, very frightening reminder that that's a terrible mistake, because once you've killed somebody for your lover, what happens if that lover leaves you? You've given everything for that person, then what?
Yes, well, she gave up everything for him. Her life is him. And he, can we make the case for Jason? I mean, he's not such a black villain necessarily.
Not at all.
Do you believe him in the play when he says, I am doing this, I'm leaving you for the princess, for us, because this will raise my position in life. I can take care of you all better. I will still love you. It's better for our children to be brought up in this palace. They will become powerful too. Is that a legitimate reason to do what he does?
Well, I believe he believes his argument.
Right.
And I think he
We
offers
always
it
do, you know.
very well.
It's a wonderful Rorschach
I'm outnumbered
test.
here. I'm standing up for Jason.
Well,
sorry.
also, you know, he's looking for a passport, literally.
Yeah.
You know, these people arrived in this country where they have been given, you know, a house, a place to live, but they don't, in modern terms, have passports. In that respect, I think you have to believe it. You know, what he's fighting for. He says, you know, if he marries Bush's daughter, his new sons will have passports, and so too will his old sons. And somewhere, I think he really does believe that he'll be visiting his lover, indeed his wife, but he chooses to forget that. You know, there are those famous couples who married on lovely little islands with palm trees who then managed to forget that the wedding was legal. You know, he married Medea coming back home on a boat.
Right.
I think he's managed to forget
It
that
meant
that
a little
was legal.
more of that ceremony to her than it did to
And
him.
you have
I
a
think
marvelous...
that's- I
yeah.
think that's probably the key to it too, isn't it? That in all love affairs, there's possibly a lover and a beloved, and one person loves the other just slightly more than the other. And normally that doesn't matter,
Right.
but it can matter.
She's obsessed with him.
She's obsessed with the fact that she has no choice but to be obsessed with him. She has nowhere to go, and she can't go home. I mean, I think that thing about...
But also, though, what I like about this production and your performance, you also get the sense that she's obsessed with him sexually, too. I mean, the magnetism that the two of you have, when he's on that stage, as much as she hates him, you can't... you're holding yourself back from just wanting to touch him physically.
Well, I think a lot of people know people who are in the middle of parting, and they complain about their spouse and say, you know, I'm going to leave him, he's absolutely dreadful, and you won't believe what he did last night. And the chap turns up and they completely change character and would give anything for him to remain. And I think that's very much how we play it, that if he only came back for any of these terrible meetings and stayed, it would be forgotten within a day.
Right.
So, you know,
I mean, they're the sort of couple who could make love on the eve of his new wedding.
Well done, my dear! Oh, look, not that I blame you for before. It's natural for a woman to be upset. But now you've learned, you're sensible. You took your time, but there you are. I was right, and you admit it. Well done.
You've cast this marvelous actor,
Jonathan Cake.
Yes,
Yeah.
who really does.
Very handsome,
Yes,
attractive.
and he transmits this
Beautiful.
narcissism that he really could make love with
Yes.
his ex-wife and go off and marry somebody else and think that's just fine because that's what he needs.
And you'd also wonderfully with Jonathan believe that he is the Jason who could rule the world. He's a sportsman. You know.
Exactly.
You'd absolutely
I mean, you
believe
know,
that.
you see the ambition in him.
Yeah.
He's burning with,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
ambition. You set this play in contemporary times.
Yeah.
Why? Well, cell phones, I think, are he has a cell phone, or somebody has a cell phone he uses. Any particular reason to update it for?
Well, I see no reason for it not to be ours at this moment, and it must be. And I was very struck when I first read this translation that it reads much more like 20th century American writing than almost anything else.
Who translated this?
It's Kenneth MacLeish and Frederick Raphael together. It's very good. And I don't think I've got past the point of seeing any reason to do anything except make it ours now. I mean, it doesn't. It's not full of tricks that we've put it into. I mean,
It's not a
the
gimmicky
21st
concept
century. Not at
production
all.
like
No, I
they-
mean the mobile phone maybe slightly throws people off the scent. If I heard that, I'd think, oh dear.
No, and it's not that.
No, we should-
It's you know, it's our story and it's now, and we relate to it very, very directly. And I think there's something rather fascinating, of course, that happens in the theatre, which is that those people who do know the end, maybe not everybody does, but those people who do know is 2,400 years old. I mean, certainly do not spend the evening dwelling on that, but there's something that happens where you feel this umbilical tie between you and it, and think, whoa, you know, we're dealing with so many years of human passion and frailty. And
But what's wonderful about the play and the production is, even though we know she's going to commit this act, there is a moment though where we think maybe she won't.
Yeah.
I mean, we know the ending, but we don't want to accept it. And you make us think that maybe the ending could be changed tonight.
Or that the chorus say, you know, you should go and do something terrible, you know, that it's not her who's saying it, that the audience, as it were, or the chorus themselves are saying, maybe this is worse than you even think, you know, and that they push and then they retract, which is really how we think, because we think in this thing that the Greeks were inventing, this sort of dialectic of, I think maybe I will, maybe I won't. And the 20th century is full of that. We're obsessed with yes, no.
Yeah, well,
You know?
to be or not to be.
For those who know the ending of this, you had staged most staggeringly the murder of the children, and everyone who I talk to about this production, they say, how does she get the children to give those performances so remarkably, particularly once they're dead? How did you work with the children to deal with, to be in that scene and to so beautifully play those scenes?
Well, with great pleasure. I mean, I think this myth that children are tricky on stage really is foolish, you know. I think children are the thing one wants on stage.
How old
So
are those children?
5 and 6.
5 and 6.
Yeah, they're terrific actors.
Yeah. I mean, when we first rehearsed this, it's not a good idea with a 5 and 6-year-old when you're suggesting to them they might like to be in a play to tell them that it's about their mother killing them. I mean, I don't think that's the starting point, nor is it a very good starting point for any actor in the rehearsal room. We had some terrible trouble when we first worked on this in Dublin, which is that some members of the chorus in Dublin had decided that their starting point was that they didn't approve.
Oh.
And that is not a way to move forward. You cannot play a member of the chorus in
Who's made up your
Medea
mind when
thinking,
the curtain goes
I
up.
don't agree with this. You think, of course you
Like
don't
being the
agree with it.
juror,
Nobody
yeah.
agrees with it. But the point is, it's a story about that journey. So
Interesting.
we didn't tell the kids when we rehearsed it in London. And then they came to Fiona one day and they said, when are you going to kill us?
Well,
So
I mean, kids
they
must like the gore.
They
must.
love the gore, and the pleasure that they have in all of that is enormous. I mean, the bit they like is the end. You know.
Well,
They
how
love
do you
being
get them to
covered
do
in blood.
that?
Well,
Endless rehearsal, actually. We
They
play
are
a lot.
so wonderful.
They're marvellous. I mean, the backstage life of the children is a whole world where they have blood and they try and scare each other. I mean, there's a lot of that goes on. And they do extra good dying if Deborah's there.
so Deborah's there a lot.
And if they have a cold, that's a big thing. They get very excited if they have a cold. One of them has a cold at the moment and he goes, I might cough. And there's a lot of that goes on. So it's a game, you know.
But it's a great game. One of them says to Fiona every night when he puts blood on himself, I'm going to frighten the ladies.
Well, they're talking about frightening the ladies. There are audible gasps at the end of this performance. Have you had any interaction with the audience? Talked to women? Have women been really profoundly disturbed emotionally by this play and have come up to you and said, "Stop! Why are you doing this to me?"
I don't think it's a gender issue,
No.
particularly.
No.
I don't think it's. I mean, I think male or female might be disturbed if they were in a very, very violent moment in their relationship. I mean, that is really what the piece is examining. It's not examining murder at all. It's really not to do with that. But I get very interested sometimes by watching members of the audience who are clearly very distressed by it. And it's not about the murders that they're distressed, it's about the level of violence in that relationship, which goes on even after this terrible act is done.
Right.
I mean, it is the great anti-war play in that respect. I feel very surely, you know, the war is had and won. This terrible thing has occurred. And they are carrying on exactly as they were before, still fighting. This is terrible, and we'll fight forever. I mean, I think that's why we leave the play as we do in this moment of
a great upheaval.
Of endless, yes, but I don't think they're ever going to leave that yard. They'll be there forever.
Yes,
You
this
know,
was a
it's-
change you made in what we normally
I don't
expect
know if it's a
from
change.
Medea.
It's much advertised as a change, but I
Uh-huh.
don't think we quite knew what Euripides was doing. I mean, there isn't a stage direction in his play to say
I
what
always
happens
thought
at
that
the
she
end.
took off in a chariot
That's
or
what we thought,
something
yeah.
like
She
that at the end.
speaks language which says, "My father's father holds me high in a chariot beyond my enemies." But I mean, what kind of language is that? She is, of course, beyond her enemies. She's utterly untouchable. She's killed her 2 children, and she's
Right.
carrying them on her body. Nobody's going to touch her. She becomes untouchable at that moment. So I got a letter the other day from a member of the audience saying I'd destroyed his life because I'd changed the end. I thought, have I? I mean, really?
It was Mystery Euripides.
Whose end, you know?
Well, it's
yes,
nice that
quite.
people feel so passionately. And yet,
Yes, indeed.
for me, the high point of the play, and I saw it more than once, was the actual murder scene, which involved your wonderful acting and so much real stagecraft. That you combined elements of sound and visuals, and I mean, didn't you have to plot that out very carefully? It went beyond
It's a very
acting.
big moment, and I had my doubts about it actually at one moment, and I only cooked it up when we got into the theatre for the technical rehearsals because I had no idea what to do. I thought, well, I better do something. It's not I don't know though that we're sitting in anticipation of that moment. I mean, I certainly hope not. I
No,
hope
no, it's
people
just when
aren't
it
coming to the
comes.
theatre
Yeah,
for
that's why
it
it's
comes
so
as a
powerful.
shock, and
Yeah.
I think that's the coup. I think that's the coup of the playwright, and hopefully we've been very true to him there, that we know it's going to happen all night long, and when it does happen, we're terribly surprised. And indeed, of course, the real coup is that we don't know if it's happened until after it's happened.
Right.
And we don't see it happening.
No.
Right.
And so we only really know when Fiona comes back on stage. And in that way, he wrote an astonishing play. You know, he
It's
was
an
very
amazing,
brave.
it must be a great play to perform because it is so tight. I mean, it's not even 90 minutes. And there is, one thinks of these Greek plays with long speeches, but there is not an extraneous word in that play. It just is action from start to finish.
Yeah, actually, he uses this fantastically domestic language, but it isn't domestic. It's kind of way up there. It's
Heightened,
like it's like a sort of fifth set of tennis in Wimbledon or something. Every ball is being walloped, you know, and yet it's completely basic. And people are saying very ordinary things, you know. And yet they're saying them at such a pitch. So it is, you know, shout all you can, that's all you can do. I mean, people just are screaming at each other, the stuff that you hear in the street when people are arguing. So it's a fantastic play, because by the time we are halfway through, it's only 40 minutes into it, and I can't believe how much we've got through already. And then there's the slide down, really, for the last bit. It just slides. It builds, and then it just, vroom, just sort of falls apart. It's a fascinating thing to play.
Can you tell us just sort of technically how you two, because you've worked quite a bit together, how you worked, how you shape her performance, what you do that gives her an idea for something? How does this relationship work in the rehearsal studio?
I think it's time. I think this is it just takes an enormous amount of time. That you rehearse often the wrong play for a long time.
Really?
And then you realise you're in the wrong play, and you have to try and rehearse the right play. I think if you take the time, you can go up on these little avenues that are entirely wrong. I'm very good at doing the wrong play.
Yeah, but Fiona's very good at rehearsing any moment, so at least I can rehearse the wrong moments and find out that it's the wrong thing. I mean, that's what's exciting. You can...
She's really in top of her game when she's wrong.
Well, you just, I am. I was worse thing. Yes, bad ideas are just as strong as good ideas. That's the horrible truth about any creative activity.
Was there a sense in Medea where you were doing the wrong play and then you found...
Oh,
Most of
yes,
the time.
all the time.
Really?
I think these Greek plays are the most exacting. You know, we began working together 11 years ago with Electra, and this was the only other return to a Greek play. But they are the toughest of all, because what is on the page is not the key to what you're going to play. You know, it's a very bold line that you read on the page. There's a very bad production available of this text. I mean, there's no question of it. What you have to find is the play behind the play, and that's very, very hard. So it's the opposite, really, of Shakespeare. You know, this is very, very difficult because you have all of those people who visit the play, unlike the chorus and Medea spend the night on there, you know, have to come with an enormous world. And they all have to find their problem. It only works if you absolutely work out each character's acute problem. So it works in some sort of counterpoint. I think it's the hardest stuff to do, but once you've broken in there, fantastic.
So how do you go about finding?
You know that you'll never find it in relaxation. It has to be somewhere terribly uncomfortable. You can't find any in the sort of pendulum swing of normality. You won't find anything. You have to find a terrible problem. And each character, as they come onto these plays, carries an enormous problem. Somebody desperately wants a son. Somebody else desperately wants someone to stop screaming. You have to believe that the other person's action is interfering terribly with your life. If you come on and think, well, I'll see how things are going today, you just won't find it there. It's actually the basis probably of all great drama, which is that the problem has already existed before the curtain opens. And so a lot of what we have to do is our preparation is quite thorough. So we do meet for an hour before the play.
Maybe the best way of describing that in a way is that an actor's choice would often be, you know, Jason announces to Medea at some point before this play begins, darling, I'm leaving you, I'm going to go and marry Creon's daughter. The natural inclination for a cast is to decide that that was 3 months ago. It is absolutely a natural. You think, well, when did that happen? Obviously, you must have this about 3 months ago. If you then say, well, hold on, what about 3 weeks ago? They go, if you say 3 days ago, the thing begins to happen. And that is, I think that's I think that's a lesson in theatre making and rehearsing. You know, you've got to take the toughest choice. It's a 3-day-old problem.
Well, as you said, you know, it begins, the action has already begun when the play starts, and I think all of the great plays start with the plot already having begun.
And the energy of the actor is in carrying that recent past, even though the audience don't know it. It communicates with, I think, literally physical energy, just the physical energy of the actors carrying the weight of that terrible story that just sits behind their heads. If you don't bring that with you, the audience are just... they're thinking about their own lives. You have to think about that life more strongly than the audience are thinking about their life, so that your imagination sort of clocks on top of their
So once
heads.
that opens, they're in this world. There's
They're
no
dragged in.
pulled in like that.
So when you say you meet an hour before the play,
Yeah.
what do you do in that hour?
We do ball games and sort of mad games, but we're all one by the time the thing starts. You couldn't just come in the evening and go, good evening all, and start it. You have to be a group. So, or we have notes that you have to agree that you'll all play for one point in the evening. That's often very good.
It's opera without the score, you know. Opera singers have it easy in some respect because there is a score there, and it is going to keep them absolutely tight, and indeed there's a conductor there. But we have to create the score every night. And the feeling I think the audience have is opera.
Yeah.
Now we only have 1 minute, I am sorry to say.
I have to ask you, you did not start out with the idea of Medea would be on Broadway. It must be a bit of a surprise that suddenly you're going to be in the Tony Award nominations and all that kind of stuff. What is this Broadway world like for you guys? I mean, is it an alien, strange land?
It's follow the yellow brick road, really. It's fantastic for us. It's like a sort of dream, is that you go on this little tour of America and suddenly you find yourself on Broadway. I mean, none of us packed winter clothes, you know. It's fantastic.
I mean, you're coming from the subsidized theater and working in the small small,
Yeah.
small places, and now all of a sudden, you're in these.
We're down in Macy's.
It did play the West End, of course, this Medea.
did, that's
So
true,
There's,
that's right,
there's an alarming connection. The dressing rooms are the same. The dressing rooms are woefully
Are
similar.
you at a Niederlander theater? They own a few in the West End too, so it might be the same.
Absolutely.
It's a thrilling production of a great love story, to use your words. Deborah Warner, the director, wonderful job. Thank you for
Thank you.
being with us tonight.
we want to say that Medea is running at the what's the
Oh,
theater?
yes.
The Brooks Atkinson until the 22nd of February.
Until the 20th. And Fiona Shaw is a sexy, beautiful, and terrifying Medea.
Say that twice.
Indeed.
You are. Medea is sexy. She
Yeah.
is. So.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being our guest
Thank
tonight.
you.
Thank you.
This course must be run. No weakness. No. Memories. Flesh of your flesh. Just forget you love them. For one short day, forget. Then weep, wretch! Weep! Who killed to prove her love? Hold your feet!
My sons, my darlings.
They were my children, mine!
Love made you murder them.
That you might die of it!
Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the Friedrich Loewe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, and public funds from the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
Playbill Online is the official website of Theatre Talk and the home of the Playbill Club, providing information and opportunities for theatre lovers. We welcome your questions or comments for Theatre Talk. Thank you and good night.